Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to welcome Nate Barnett and Nick Schwasman to join us tonight. Remember that down in the description below, there is a link to a Google form. So if you're on your school device and you can't utilize the chat, see, he's right down to it. He's got it. Go ahead and click in that and you can ask your questions there and Mrs. Diana will pop them up into the stream and we will go from there. But use the live chat if you want to ask a question and we'll go from there. So welcome, guys. I'm so excited to see you. This is taking me back. So let's just start by if you guys can just, so we've got, I think Nate is over here to my right, and then Nick is down below. So if you guys just want to say hi and tell us, what have you been doing in the years since you graduated from RH? I can say that about you now because it's been long enough. It's been a decade.
I've never thought about that. That's crazy. Yeah. Oh my God. I'll go first, I guess. So I graduated in 2010. Wow, that sounds like a long time ago. I went off to Yale University to study music. And while I was there, I did a wide variety of different things. I played in the Yale Symphony Orchestra. I played violin with them. I did a bunch of different kind of theater. I was in Sweeney Todd with the Yale Dramat. I was in Into the Woods. I also music directed some shows. I music directed Once Upon a Mattress. And I wrote incidental music for a bunch of different shows, for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and for A Lie of the Mind by Sam Shepard. And throughout that time, Nick and I actually were already sort of collaborating. We had done a bunch of stuff, in high school. And while I was at Yale, Nick and I worked on some of the music for A Lie of the Mind. And we also, my senior project was I wrote a big piece for a chamber choir. And one of the pieces that I wrote was actually set to a text that Nick had written. It was a poem called Angortamor. And so I graduated in 2015. And after that, I moved to New York City, where I was teaching at a school called the Birchwood and Lennox School, which is in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I ran the choral department there. And while I was in New York, I was also doing a bunch of different new music things. I was conducting with a group called C4, which is an experimental new music choir. I also music directed some musicals. I did In the Heights at the Columbia Secondary School actually basically almost in the Heights. And it was really a cool experience because a bunch of those kids in the show were of Dominican heritage and were basically living the life that we were talking about. And then spent a couple of years in New York City. And then after that moved to Philadelphia for a bunch of different reasons. One of which was because Nick was living there and we had actually been making some theater, which we'll get to later. But we had been doing a variety of different things, and then we basically decided we wanted to start something together. And that's when we started Drip Symphony, which we'll talk about more as we go on. And I moved to Philly in 2017, 2 years after graduating, and I've been here ever since. So a couple of years just doing a bunch of stuff with Nick and elsewhere. And then for the last 2 years, I've been in graduate school at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, studying choral conducting. So that's a little overview there. I'm sure we'll get into more of that.
Yeah,
cool,
awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I can pick up from there, Nate. So I guess a brief little bit of my journey since graduating 11 years ago. I first went right away to Philadelphia to study musical theater at the University of the Arts. So 4 years there. And then after that, a quick turnaround, I jumped back into grad school to study devised theater, which is a moment sort of in my path that I think I really had a big discovering devised theater. I'd like to talk more about that. But through that, I went through this 2-year curriculum called the Pig Iron School Advanced Performance Training, where I learned things like Lecoq training, a movement training, clowning, generally things about devising, and I was making work constantly throughout those 2 years. And when that was all done, I said, hey, Nate, New York's boring, come over to Philadelphia.
He's right.
And so from there, we started making more and more work under our company, Drip Symphony. Yeah, I should mention too that just recently I did start an apprenticeship, fatefully in 2019, that was ended in March 2020. But I did have that a little bit of an apprenticeship time at a theater called the Lantern Theater, which does a lot of classics, things like Shakespeare here in Philadelphia.
Nice. Awesome. So what a gamut. And that's kind of what I put in your description, is that it's like this very eclectic experience you all have. And I know, Nick, your mom told me that you've done some adjudicating too, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm lucky to be partnered with the English-speaking union. Actually, Rush Henrietta, you might have a shot at this. They hold a Shakespeare competition on a national scale every year, but it starts in the very small high schools, and then from there, winners of a high school competition will compete in a regional championship, and eventually the final competition is in New York City. And the things that they can offer to these students who win are amazing experiences, great education opportunities and scholarships, things like that. So I've been involved here with English Speaking Union's Shakespeare competition in Philadelphia for the past 3 years. And I was so glad we were able to go through with it this year, which was completely virtual. So instead of actually getting to see these talented students perform face to face, I still got to see them on my screen, and so we were able to give out the awards, and it's still going. So that is a great experience for me. I love seeing young kids sort of starting their passion for theater, and it's a perfect experience.
Yeah, and I know Trish Anise used to run. She did Shakespeare competitions that were regional like that, and I know Laura Reed pushed those too. And I'm pretty sure, my memory, it's been such a blur, like March. See, Laura, yes, we participated. Yes, Laura. And so it's all part of it. Hey. Thanks, Miss Reed. I knew if she was watching, she'd jump in and help me out. And Nate, what's funny too is I have to give a shout out because you worked in New York. You worked with Melissa Wozniak, right?
Yes, I did. Do you know Melissa?
I went to college with her.
Wow. Yeah, Melissa and we conducted together, and then we actually worked at the same school for a while.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, you see it all on Facebook, all these connections. I was like, I wonder how they know each other.
Love that.
Yeah. So, all right. So I guess like in terms of what we want to talk about, I wonder if we just want to jump in, because what's unique that you guys have is this idea of, you started your own theater company. And I know, Nick, I want to hear all about that stuff that you said that I'm sure nobody has any idea about, including, I'm not going to pretend I know everything, all that kind of experience. But maybe let's start talking about your theater and what you guys are interested in putting on, how that works, like what your space is like, just this giant thing. And can you squeeze it in?
Sure. I guess I'll start off before we talk really about maybe what Drip Symphony does and its mission, how we just sort of came up with that. And what we were thinking about while we were deciding to kind of go in, the whole way and start the company. So when I was graduating undergrad musical theater at the University of the Arts, I had this experience when I was rehearsing my 32-bar cuts and my book of monologues that I was just to be bought and sold. And I remember my first audition in New York. I went in this tiny, Pearl Studios, all these kind of small hallways, and I turned the corner and there's this room full of people who look exactly like me. They had brown eyes, hair, to a T. It was like I was staring in a room full of mirrors. And I couldn't help but think at that point that I was an artist and I wanted to be able to express, and I wanted to be able to help shape the stories I'm saying. And I wanted more involvement in the process of what it is to make a show. I felt a little bit cheated as showing a 32-bar cut and people making decisions based on that. So from there, I realized it's important to me to make my own work. And I think that is where the roots of Drip Symphony get planted, is in this idea of making your own work. And so, Nate, I don't know if you want to pick it up from there, but that's sort of where we were.
Yeah, I mean, we're both people who just want to be creating this stuff ourselves, and we also are both people who love watching and being a part of great art. I don't know about you, Nick, but when I get into a Sondheim score or In the Heights, just dealing with that stuff is so exciting, and I think we both really want to do that ourselves, and we always have. I've always written music. Nick has always written text and wanted to create dance and things like that. And so we basically thought, really, the world doesn't give you an opportunity. There's no job that is you are the person who writes this thing. You have to make that opportunity yourself. I mean, if you're going to perform in a show, there are jobs for you potentially. But being a playwright, you have to make that yourself. Then you can get hired once you've done it. But you've got to make that happen. And so we wanted to figure out a way to do that. And I think like something that we have always found really central to what we do is not wanting to have sort of defined roles around I'm the playwright and I'm the composer and I'm the music director. And those things start to happen, but we've always been interested in how people who are creative can sort of get together in a room and create something that is actually new that doesn't necessarily fit into those boxes. And that's kind of how we got our start. I mean, our very first show, I would say, together was called Wedgwood on the Green. And it was a show that was based on a story that Nick had written in college. And it was the summer after I had graduated from college, and Nick had spent a year working in Philly, and we wanted to put something up. And we were like, okay, we have this text, so what do we do? And we got into a room, and I started writing music, basically to Nick reading the text. And we had another friend who is a really good voice actor and who also was pretty good at sound effects. And he started creating some of the sounds in the story. And we had no idea where this was going to turn out, like when we started. But basically, we started creating a live audio play and a live radio play. And so we you know, it was not something we were like, we're going to set out and write a live radio play. But when all was said and done, what we had was all sounds. And so we decided, okay, when the audience comes in, we're going to blindfold them, because this is what makes most sense for this show. You know, this is not.
I'll jump in there, Nate. I think through our company's history, you see a lot of how we try to work creatively with the limitations that we have around us. And I know for that, we didn't know a lot about lights. It was one of our first things we worked on. And although we were great collaborating over the script and over the music and things like that, we were on a short timeline. And so we decided, hey, it would be great if we presented this as a radio play. And we really leaned into the audio elements, and we ended up making it all Foley sounds, something that I first learned in Rush Henrietta, which is sort of all acoustic sounds happening off stage, to really create a rich environment sonically for these people. An interesting anecdote there is the blindfolds were, they weren't mandatory, you know, they were just a suggestion for the audience. They were all one clean new bandana on each chair, but every audience member chose to put them on, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Very trusting.
Yes. But I guess too, maybe to bring us back, Nate, about, you know, making new work and starting Drip Symphony, we really wanted to get together to make stories happen that without waiting. And so we knew we only had some skill sets, but we were ready to learn. And so oftentimes I say, everything we do, I've done for the first time. And I think that with that spirit, we moved forward.
Yeah.
So you would characterize what you do as kind of experimental.
Okay, so actually that's great.
Yeah, I think it's really central to what we do is like, when we walk into a room, we don't want to know what's going to happen before it happens. We're trying things out constantly. And so every show we've done has been kind of in that vein. The second, we actually did Wedgwood on the Green again, because it had gone really well and we wanted to present it once we had actually formed Drip Symphony. The first time we did it, it was just called Nick and Nate Productions. So we wanted to remount it, and we did it in the Philadelphia Fringe Festival in 2017, which was a really good chance to sort of get it out to a broader audience. And so that show was just, we were like, really, how can we create a truly immersive environment? And so, Nick, I'm going to let you talk about how we had people sitting, because that was a really fun kind of way of doing it.
Yeah. So we just try to think originally from the get-go. And so a lot of things that might be standard in some theater practitioners' heads aren't necessarily there when we begin. And one of those things that's very common is the relationship seating-wise between an audience and the performance. And although, you know, some of you students at home, you might know these sort of terms like in the round or in the alley or theater on a thrust stage and things like that. Well, we decided, or we come up with the idea of to do what we would call in and out of the round. So we did about 30 seats in an oval in a black box. And we created light and scene and action that happened both behind, outside of the circle, and within the center. They were on these swivel stools so they could pivot anyway, and we incorporated all four walls of the black box to kind of give a very loose idea of a fourth wall, and to give each audience member a unique perspective. We really believe strongly in that. We think that helps facilitate conversation after the performances. Did you see that from where you were sitting, or was that just there for me? And I like to say in those types of seatings that your seat will at one point be the best seat in the house, and at another point be the worst seat in the house. But we think that instead of everybody seeing the same perspective, it really does help sort of build a community that's in the audience after the show.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But we do devised work. I guess I should say a little bit about that too. That's really when I learned about devised theater, is when I started working with a company called Pig Iron, and they're a phenomenal company based here in Philadelphia. They're about 25 years old, and their work is seen all over the world. And I was very fortunate to train with them. And what is kind of new, I think, in the United States in a way, this idea of devised theater, which may have started around the 1960s, but really got started in France a long time ago. And so really this means it's a way of making work collaboratively. So in this other world, or maybe a familiar place to some other theater artists might be, that a playwright would sit down, usually alone, write a big text, then that playwright submits it to theater companies. They sit there forever. Finally, an artistic director pulls one out. Oh, we might want to do this one. Then it's given to a casting director. That casting director then, tries it out on people. And all of these steps happen with these people alone. And what devised theater is saying, let's get all of these people in the room. Let's start sharing some of these responsibilities, and let's start creating things together. So when we work, we might know we're making a show that has 3 performers, but we might be working with 7 actors. And the whole time we know we're not sure who's going to play who. Maybe I'll have to step in the role of, somebody who's very different from me, just so that we can advance and expand that role. And we like to see as many different people try out these roles while they're still wet clay. So that's one way of thinking about devised theater. I would say there's not really a definition to devised theater, but there is sort of, it is sort of in the way I described it. But to each person, I think it's important that they have their own definition.
Does that go back to your roots in those 24-hour plays where you stretch your...
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was thinking so much about this lately. Yeah, when back in our age, we had some great experiences. I think I maybe did this twice, maybe 3 times, a 24-hour play festival, which really does feel like what I would call my work nowadays, devising kind of really short timelines and just a huge amount of creation happening. And what I remember, I did a play with a good friend, Charlie Mueller. The pitch was a door-to-door microwave salesman who just can't take no for an answer. And we made it all in 24 hours. And I was so empowered with this idea that, wait a minute, I can be a playwright, or I just did that. It only took 24 hours.
There he is.
Yeah. Hey, Chuck. It's things like that in my education, I think, that have been the most valuable things for me, like 24-hour play festivals, and less of things like monologue coaching and things like that,
Yeah, I see Charlie there. We love it. Well, and now that we've talked about it, somebody's going to come see me next week. So what's this 24-hour play?
I mean, this is what happened. We begged. There was not a thing when we were in school, and like junior year, we had heard about it happening in the past. We begged Trisha Neese, we were like, please, let us do it. Let us stay up all night and write plays. We really want to. And yeah, it was a tradition for a little bit. When did it stop?
Last year, I think we were batting around the idea of doing it last year. The year before, I don't think. It was just about timing that, having the adults who can stay,
Totally.
Because I the year before I had just come back from having my littlest. So I was like, I can't be gone all night from my baby who's, I'm still her main source of nutrition. So and then of course now, we kind of, I know we were talking about it last year, and then, we were planning on doing, because this year was going to be, or last year we were going to do a Shakespeare. I was super excited. We were going to do like Shakespeare and coffee 3 years ago. Thank you, Mrs. Diana. She's always got my back. But I mean, it's something I would love to see kick back up again. I know it's an exhausting run, but it was such good stuff. It was such good stuff.
You can't, you can't stress too much about it. You've only got 24 hours. Whatever you make is what you make. There's no hemming and hawing about whether it's right. You got to go. And then at the end, if it's terrible, everyone's, oh, they made it in 24 hours. And if it's great, they're like, wow, they made that in 24 hours. It's so incredible.
It's a win-win.
But you develop these skills, quick decision making, and to say yes and yes and yes and in a short amount of time. And I believe that those are the skills that I value most in my professional work. Is how can I trust myself to make this decision? Is this a good title? Yes or no? Is this the way the scene should start? Because you're constantly making those decisions. So something like 24 hours. Crash course in that is a great experiment. Experiments, Nate. You want to talk about experiments?
I'm down, but I'm wondering, Aaron. We will talk until it's all over. So if you have questions or want to guide us, feel free.
No, I find this to be the best. If you guys it's been so symbiotic and just that's happened in everyone. We just let it go, and if we finish, then I ask a question or somebody in the chat asks a question, then we move from there. So. Keep talking. It's just I'm just here to listen. I want it to be a conversation that I'll jump into if I need to. But
love it. Well, feel free to interrupt us at any time. Experiments. Yeah, I'm not. Is there a specific thing you're thinking of, Nick?
Yeah. Well, why don't I talk a little about that, and then you can talk about the Droplet Series.
Great.
So we're interested all the time. We're always asking questions, and so that leads us into what sometimes we call experiments in performance. And a lot of times that starts with us asking, what is performance? Where do we see it in our everyday? What about an action happening is theatrical? Where is the drama? And so we will look at things like, what's it like just to walk on stage? How do you hold the attention of a stranger? And questions like that. And we really try to hold on to those as much as we can and see and try again. It can lead us to some interesting places and some interesting collaborations. What maybe our goal is there is to refine our artistic process. And we've come to believe that most artistic processes are more similar than they are dissimilar. So we have the opinion that the process that a painter might go through from looking at a blank canvas to completing it might not be that different from what a choreographer looks like when they have just 3 minutes of music to when they have something completely done. And so it is in that spirit that we try to forward these ideas and push them. So we have this little series called the Droplet Series. Nate?
Yeah, my turn. We started doing this. So the name Drip Symphony, actually, we should just tell you first real quick, comes from a kind of combination of our interests. Nick, there was a period, and he still is, but there was a period where he was really interested in the work of Jackson Pollock and drip painting. And I have a really more traditional classical music background. I grew up playing violin and singing and playing piano and those sorts of things. And so when we were thinking about forming an actual company, we wanted to find something that fused both of us, but also these different sort of approaches, one being very experimental, very sort of physical, athletic, wild, and one that is more sort of tamed and traditional. And a lot of the work I think we do really does sort of meet at the middle of those two things. There's this sort of formal training that we both have, like, I'm more classical music. Nick grew up training Irish dance and has a formal training in musical theater. And then we sort of see how can we let that go wild. So that's sort of how Drip Symphony, the name, came to be. And we were thinking about, after we did our first production, which I told you about in the Fringe Festival, how could we do something sort of more throughout the year that is really focused on the process of invention and the process of collaboration. And because I would say, in addition to us being really interested in experiments, we're really interested in collaborating with people and finding other artists, especially in Philadelphia, but also around the country, that are doing really cool work, and how we can bring those things together and make cool art that fuses them. So we came up with this idea of the Droplet Series, Drip Symphony Droplet Series. Very cute, I know. And
those language skills coming in.
Drip drop.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So we decided to create this thing called the Droplet Series, and we've really only done one full one, but it was called Droplet Number One. We worked mainly with an artist called whose name is Kilo Martin. He's a great dancer that Nick, you met him through a variety of different things, I think like work and dance stuff.
Yeah, and when we solidified this idea, actually, we were doing background work on an M. Night Shyamalan film.
That's right. That's right. So it started like a lot of these processes, and this one was more open than some of the others, where at least those we had a story. This one, it was really like, okay, we're three individuals with three different skill sets. How do we bring these things together? And so Nick, he brings all this Irish dance skills. Kilo does more like modern dance and also hip hop dance. And I was at the time really getting interested in some of Bach's, the music of Bach, and specifically his counterpoint and inventions. Literally, he wrote a lot of pieces called inventions. And so we started playing around with this, and we started, the thread that we started to pull was Kilo's grandfather. And I'm trying to remember, he worked on the railroad in Philadelphia, right, Nick?
So he was a free slave, went up north, and his first job was on the railroads. Yeah. And because we believe people's personal culture really should inform the work we make together, and we should celebrate that, it came to discussions about how at the time his grandfather was a free slave working on the railroads. My family was coming as Irish immigrants, would most likely have been taking jobs similar. And so we decided to create this imagined world of what it might have been like for maybe perhaps our ancestors to meet in this way, and really to talk about how our cultures influenced each other at the time. And so we set out to make a work like that with really Kilo at the helm. And we didn't know what we were making, and it ended up we made a music video, but we didn't really know where it was going to go.
Yeah, like last time I told you, we started making stuff, and eventually it turned into a blindfolded radio play. Well, this time we had dance, and then I started writing music sort of in this neo-Baroque style, but also we were getting interested in this folk music that was sung by railroad workers and had been collected by Alan Lomax back in the early 20th century. And so we started to fuse these things together, and what we ended up with was a music video, where I wrote a score, and we went down to some abandoned railroad tracks in South Philly and filmed a bunch of dance. We played the music and they danced out, and we had a production manager who helped us film it. And yeah, we made a music video. Listen, we're not filmmakers.
It was good. I remember when you guys put it out there. It was so good.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. And I think one of the things that really says about us is like, we weren't pretending that we were going to make, as high production value a music video as you're going to see on Vivo. But like, that was our best way of capturing what we had made. And it was a real reflection of a collaboration that we had done with this person. And so, yeah, I mean, that I think is kind of a core thing about the album we made.
And I also, Nate, I remember too, we had sort of a live premiere of that, which I remember. What was fun about that is that we had sort of artifacts from our shoot and our process sort of on display, almost like curated like a museum there. So Nate had a listening station there with all of the music, the folk music he just talked about that inspired his compositions, which people could sit and listen to that sort of primary source documents. We had examples of old tools that were used at the time to work on the rails. We had instruments unique to the cultures out there so that people could, yes, experience that 3.5-minute clip, but really know that what we were trying to learn and talk about more was sort of these peripheral things about our culture. And I thought that was pretty unique, and I saw people enjoy that. But I should also say the Droplet Series is aimed at small-scale collaborations with an artist of another medium. So this one is an example of working with a choreographer. So next we might work with, I don't know, Nate, a chef, a sculptor. We try to keep somebody from a different medium.
We have a sculptor we've worked with who makes really great work, and we've wanted to do something with her for a while. Her name is Paige Miller, so she might be up next. We'll see.
Awesome. And I love that too. That goes along with that immersive experience of seeing it's not just about the end result, but how did you get there? That's awesome. So Charlie over here, although you called him Chuck, and I remember him as Charlie, but he wants to know, how do you make sure that you'll have an audience to see your work? What kind of challenges? I mean, that's a good question. That how, especially when you're a baby in the field, as exciting, especially if you're doing something that people might look at and say, blindfold? What are you really? And how do you, I think that's a great question. How do you get an audience?
So I'll say a little bit. We are always asking ourselves, we want new audiences, and we want to create our own audience. And I think sometimes people compete for the same audiences when you have specifically 501c3 theater in the same region. But we are not specifically interested in gaining audiences who are already interested in theater. We'd like to bring new audiences into the theater. So that's one thing which we keep on the top of our mind. But I gotta say, starting off, it's gonna be your mom. Hi, Mom. It's gonna be your friends. Hi, Chuck. They're gonna be the people to show up, and they're gonna tell their friends. And you might have a small house, but you still got something going, and one thing leads to another, and it's a slow process, but that's sort of my advice there. I'll share a little secret. Not only does doing something in and out of the round lead for an interactive experience in my audience, but it also means that the house is sold out if I sold 25 tickets. So I try to create something for the size audience I expect. So if I think I'll be able to get 20 butts in seats for that night, then I'll try to work with 20 seats in the theatrical space. We did another show where there was 50 seats, and we had to keep adding seats. Remember, Nate? We had to keep adding folding chairs. We got an audience up to 75 on a space that really we were only aiming for 50. So that's another little trick, another piece of advice. Nate?
Yeah, this question is a question that all arts organizations ask, and I think the model of a college or a high school show is one of the most successful, because you have these huge communities and these huge ensembles that draw audiences in. But in every professional context I've worked in, this is a question that we ask, is who is the audience? Especially classical music, everyone's the audience is dying. They're all great, and this isn't it's something that is slowly changing. But I think one of the things that we have really worked with, and that in a variety of contexts I've done, is teaming up with other organizations. So there are organizations out there that already have audiences, or that have people who are interested in them for other reasons. And you might be able to team up with them and say, hey, can we work together? And hey, if you guys want to give us a shout out to your membership. So I will say, most of the work that we've done has been in partnership with a theater in Philadelphia called Plays and Players Theater, which we formed a relationship with way back, probably about, way back, 8 years ago or something, 9 years ago, haha. Feels like way back for us. But this was how we were able to do this in the first place, was that they were able to say, hey, if you guys will clean up the space after you're done and whatnot, we'll give you a really good rate, and then split the door sales with us. And then meanwhile, there are people who already go to Plays and Players. There's a community there that we can draw on. Being part of a fringe festival is a way of getting the word out. And we had people who came from Minnesota specifically for the Philadelphia Fringe Festival who came to our show because they just wanted to see stuff, and they read about ours, and we happened to plan it at a time when nothing else was happening. So they showed up. And when we did Shelter, we teamed up with, it wasn't Phil Abundance. What was the name? It was the
Broad Street Ministry. I was just about to go there. Because it's not just other performing arts organizations that you can look to help build an audience. You can look to other nonprofit organizations or organizations of any kind that may have something to do with what you're talking about. And when we were making this play Shelter, we were looking a lot into this sort of idea of homelessness, or people currently experiencing homelessness. And we realized that right under our nose across the street was this place called Broad Street Ministry that practiced what they called radical hospitality to that community. And so we, as part of our process, we share creative control, we all volunteered there throughout the process of building the show, so that we could glean insights into what it was really like, and to talk to people who really experienced that. And that ended by us offering, I think it was 5 tickets a night to people who experience homelessness in the city that year. So we would give them to the Broad Street Ministry the people who run it, and if they had somebody who they felt was in good enough shape or might enjoy something like being in the community of a theater, they gave the tickets to them. So, you know, that's one way you can build an audience too. Reach out to your communities. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important about the collaboration isn't just the creative. It's about, you know, being a part of your community and your neighborhood is huge. And I think theaters all over the place are doing that. You know, every time you go to a show and they, you know, pass a hat, like, we're raising money for this or to help out with this. It's, you know, I think that's something that the theater world does a really good job. The artistic world, I should say, in general does, is being a part of change and community building. So, yeah, I think that's really important. So I'm just trying to think. So, Nick, when you talked about that training you did, the one thing that stood out, because, you know, I don't know if you recall my problem with clowns, but you said you learned clowning and all of that.
Yes, I did.
It goes back. I shouldn't have watched it when I was so little, but.
So, yeah, clowning is a huge, difficult, probably the most difficult thing a performer can do. And I didn't know anything about it before I started this school. But this idea of red-nosed clown, which comes from street performers, often in Europe, where it began, is somebody who can walk on stage with nothing else, or walk into a public square, or I should say, get the attention of strangers by just standing there. And it's all about interacting with your audience. So you seeing what they're giving you, and you're trying to take that one step further, usually for a laugh, but not always for a laugh. So when I started learning clown, it's like being pushed out of a plane. You're literally sitting in front of an audience, and we used to do this thing where if you didn't make them laugh within the first 30 seconds, you literally get the hook, and you just try again, and and you try again. We would do prop-based comedy where we would put something like a water bottle, a chair, any object, center stage, and you would enter. You have about 3 minutes to make somebody laugh. No hard feelings if you don't, but then it's next, and we see how many jokes can we make out of this object? How can we do that? And I think what I learned was you can't go in planning anything. You really have to be there in the moment. And for me, as a performer, which I do, I'd say less and less performing and more directing, devising and stuff lately, that's terrifying to me, you know, absolutely terrifying. I love to have a plan. Sorry, my computer's dying. All right, we're good. But yeah, it's a rich history.
You said that was a part of a bigger program that you learned.
So,
was that at your college or?
There's this school in France called Lecoq, and it's very, very old. Jacques Lecoq is the founding, person around it, and he does an acting pedagogy that sort of starts with the body and moves into text, and by the end, something sort of like scene study. And I had learned a lot of other acting pedagogies before I got to this point, things like Meisner. They're usually a step-by-step process, but Lecoq focuses on the body first. So there's no speaking in the first year of Pig Iron School. You're not even allowed to talk. You also don't touch a script. I always say it's break the pencils, rip the script, because they really want you to be able to write on your feet or to learn that skill. Now, my teachers in Philadelphia, Dan Rothenberg, Quinn Bordell, Dito Van Riesenberg, they all studied at Lecoq in Paris. They went there and trained. They were graduates of Swarthmore College here in Pennsylvania, went there, then moved back to Philadelphia. When they were just youngins, they started this company called Pig Iron, which has, in America, really sort of helped to expand the work of devised theater and sort of get that idea out there. And now they run an MFA program in collaboration with the University of the Arts, where I got my undergrad from. And it's one of the first of these types of programs in the United States, although more and more schools are adapting creative collaboration, borderline devised theater practices into their programming, definitely. So I was very fortunate to sort of be there at the beginning for this start of the school. I think I was the 4th class to ever graduate from Pig Iron School, and the first with the accreditation. So very exciting stuff.
All right, so when we get to a point when the 24-hour plays are running again, I'm going to hire you two to come on out, walk us through.
Oh,
'Cause I think that physicality is something that I think young actors especially struggle with. You know, they're so focused on the words and the notes that being able to then bring it as a whole submersive physical experience, and that can be a huge part of it. Oh, Kay sways. Kim sways good. So she wants to know if you guys remember the Superman physical comedy air synchronized swimming number. Because guess what? It's in our review this year. Recreation.
Do we remember?
Oh my gosh, Sways, I definitely remember. Sort of aside to my work in the theater, experimental and devised theater, I do a lot of prop-based choreography work now. And so I always think back on, well, it all started at Rush Henrietta, whether it was Foley sound or prop-based choreography, I got a taste of it all. And so it's burned into my memories, the goggles and everything like that. We did a swimming one, I think, with flippers and stuff.
A synchronized air,
Yeah,
that's what's
it was
this year.
One of the most fun things is that year we had done West Side Story, and we had gotten a whole bunch of people who had never done any theater before into that show, partly because we needed to have like gangs or whatever. And we weren't, the most gang-like
guys, Nate.
You guys weren't? No.
No. And so Mike Poneray did his very first show. He did West Side Story, and then he still talks about those dances, Sways. He's like, that swimming thing was the best thing I've ever done. And he thought he was going to major in theater for a little while. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Well, and that's something that's, that's what's neat. Again, like we were talking about before, that's so neat about, that's the one, we have to look for the positives as they trickle in from COVID, is that we have this opportunity to do these things that don't fit. And that year was a really like a thematic year, because Trish did Romeo and Juliet that year in the fall, right?
Oh, yes.
I still have that picture of the cast on my wall in my classroom.
So actually, I think we did Romeo and Juliet after we did West Side Story.
Mike Poneray's here. Look at that.
I remember Romeo and Juliet, but I also remember Winter's Tale as well. I'm not sure which one was which, but
the fall play. Romeo and Juliet, it was the fall play. And then Winter's Tale was the Shakespeare in the spring. Yeah, she was crazy. There was so much that year. And then there was the variety show. That was crazy.
We had a little prop-based or costume-based comedy back in Winter's Tale. I was playing, it was a fool and clown scene, really funny scene in that play. But what happens is one character steals all of the belongings of another character on stage. And that means we were trying to block in things like, how is he going to steal my pants without me knowing? How is he going to steal my shirt? How's he going to steal my necklace? And in rehearsals, we decided to run it for the first time. And the final punchline was me dropping his pants and him stepping out and quickly putting on. He had big, fluffy underwears on. Well, the first time I did it, I should have rehearsed it extra because I pulled everything down. Sorry, Trish and Denise. Good thing it was rehearsal, but yeah, prop-based comedy, it's always good.
Was it Charlie? Because he keeps saying "stop the story." Was it him?
Yeah, it was Charlie.
Sorry, Charlie. Yeah, it was Charlie. He still has nightmares about it.
Oh, but he survived and he's stronger now.
That's right.
Just to tell you guys that there is, because we have like a 30-second. So this is for the audience. If you haven't watched one of these before, we do have about a 30-second lag, up to 30-second between what you see us saying and what we see you posting. So just as an FYI, keep putting those questions in. But if we don't look at it right away, it's because we're not seeing it right away. Yeah, and I think that's one of those things, is learning that physicality is incredibly important. And
yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to even imagine before you start working on it. Lecoq, Pig Iron, we did this process called the neutral person. And one of it starts as just entering, or not even, you could be center stage and you have to be a body that's in sleep. And we start to look at that shape of the body and we say, is this person looking more like they're deceased or more like they're sleeping or more? And so we try to shape, well, then what does the body in sleep look like? Even more specifically, how do we differentiate that to things that are close to what the body looks like when they're sleeping, but not? And my mind was just exploded. And you really get to learn the subtleties of movement, which help, yes, in dance and choreography, but also with just general presence anytime you're on stage.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really important. So I'm thinking ahead to COVID being over and how we're going to have to come in and do a workshop, because that sounds amazing and good.
Oh, I'd love to.
So Nate, I always, on Facebook is where I kind of keep up because everybody's so crazy busy, right? Nate, you sent that, or I stole that beautiful picture of you conducting. Tell us a little bit about your conducting work, because I know you're getting your master's in that. You're about halfway through that program?
I know. I'm actually graduating in like 3 weeks. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Degree,
I should have known that from you doing your all of those things you were doing. But so what have you been doing? What are your kind of your conducting, and how has that been shaping you and your
I think maybe the picture you saw when I graduated from school, I went to New York and I was working with this group called C4, which is a collective of choral conductors and choral singers and choral composers. And that was a whole different world of experimental music, but it does intersect with theater because a lot of those people write theater as well. And basically that was a chance for us to write and conduct and perform music that had never been done before. So I wrote music for those people, and with them I was, waving my hands and getting things off the ground with them. I was, that was a really great chance to just sort of like see what was out there that was not what you learned in school, because like when you're in school, a lot of what you're doing is sort of traditional stuff, and a lot of times it's easier because that's what you have time for. And that was the first time I was really trying out super wacky stuff. And a lot of that, the things we learned, we played with when we were doing stuff with Drip Symphony. And then like, it's been really all over the place. Like when I was in New York, I got hit up by this artist named Yeba, who, not directly through her agent.
She's incredible.
Yeah, well, she wanted to make a music video for her song Evergreen, where she wanted to basically have a classical church choir backing her up, a 24-person choir. And so through a mutual friend, she got in touch with me and was like, hey, do you want to help me like arrange and then assemble the choir and create this? So it was the most surreal thing. I had actually just moved to Philly, and these projects, they move fast, they always do. And so I got a call on a Thursday night, and Friday afternoon I was on a train up to New York City. I went to her like friend's studio, where she showed up from the gym in her sweats. This is like a person who I like kind of idolize a little bit. I love her music, and we just sat down basically at a keyboard and we wrote it. We wrote it all. I arranged the stuff for choir. She was singing tunes to me. I was like, okay, that's how we can make this work for 8 voices, and then assembled 24 people that I had worked with in New York. And we had this one shoot day at a church up in the Upper West Side. And it was crazy. It was like a 16-hour day. And this is where I learned that in those scenarios, it's all about getting everything exactly right and then capturing it. We took 12 full hours to get everything ready. And then it was about 1 hour of filming. It was not like a slow process. It was like getting all the lights, getting all the sound equipment set up. They had a giant crane set up so that they could get the beam of light coming through that church window, so you could get that sort of like heavenly ethereal effect. You can look it up. This video, it's the live quote unquote evergreen video that Yeba made, has the choir that I assembled, and you'll see me from behind waving my hands.
Oh my gosh, I have to go watch that because I love her. There's that song. She sang. Was it with Ed Sheeran that she did a song? Because I love him too. She's her voice is just butter.
Incredible.
She's so good.
Incredible, yeah. And so
I'm gonna have to look that up. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really fun. And so it's been kind of all over the place. At Rutgers I was working with more student groups, and that's sort of a longer term thing for me is eventually I'd love to be able to run a choral department at a university. So that's what this degree is on the way to. I just actually, for the first time, everything's been shut down for COVID, obviously, but 2 weeks ago was able to get together a choir of 8 people. We were masked. We were separated by 10 feet each. Most of them were already vaccinated. We were in a big theater, and I got to do a 30-minute set of some cool new music.
What you posted that, right?
Yeah, I think there was a picture floating around, and actually there will be a recording that I've got that I'll be sharing soon. So
awesome, wonderful. Yeah, let us know. We'll post it and on Facebook for our spotlight that I keep getting more likes for, and I think it's because of these that people are joining in. I have
Cool.
subscribers now too. It's hilarious.
Okay.
I've never done anything on YouTube, and now I have. But it sounds like it's the alum. They just want to see our people.
Look at you building new audiences.
I know. Yeah, right. My massive audience of like 7, but we'll take it. So we're winding down here because we've only got a little bit of like 10 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, please throw those in the comments or fill out the form. I think it's like these are the kind of things that I think people have really enjoyed hearing about. But, you know, kind of the idea of there's 2 questions. One, I want to know what do you think has been your most powerful musical, theatrical, dance? It can be anything, artistry moment, because you guys, again, do so much different stuff. What's really been like the most impactful, memorable, you know, artistic moment for you?
I've thought a little about this. I'll jump right in because I'm going to briefly say 3, starting off with the first. The first time I decided to do theater was sitting in the audience at Rush Henrietta. Maybe I was in middle school, and it was a production of Pippin. Leading player comes on to the apron, and I'm sitting probably right next to Nate, front row center. My neck cranes up, and I was in love. And so that's hard to say that any other thing is more impactful from that because that's where I got hooked. But I can say I had a great experience after finishing working on this play, Wedgwood on the Green, which was really inspired by a lot of things that happened to me in my high school days. I was able to dedicate it eventually to Daniel Mueller, my friend Chuck's dad, and it was definitely a beautiful moment for me to be able to do that. So those are 2 off the top of my head. And Nate, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah. Well, so you may not know, we haven't talked about this yet, but Nick and I also, we do Irish dance and music together. And so we had a couple months in a row where we were playing galas. So first we did this gala with Pig Iron where Nick went to school, and they invited us to do that. And then because we had done that, we got invited to do this thing with the Philadelphia Ballet, where every year they do a fundraiser with, Nick, remind me of the name. Manna, which provides food assistance to people who have trouble accessing it. And they do this huge gala at the Forest Theater in Philadelphia called Shut Up and Dance. And so, you know, that was a chance for us to perform for like 2,000 people or something in this packed house. And I will say, you know, that was just fun. Like we got to just create something that was exciting. It was rhythmic. And like, I don't know, we don't have too long left. So I just want to say this to the kids who are watching. If you are like, I think the reason that we keep coming back to this is because it really is fun. And it is a chance for us to do something that is exciting and not prescribed by the man or taxes or any of those things. You know, like this is a chance to really get to express something, make people feel alive, make people feel joy. And it's like such a gift to be able to do that and to be able to do it with friends, to be able to do it on your own terms. It's a ton of work. It doesn't always pay very well, but it's really, really cool. And so, you know, I think like for any of you out there who feel some passion for it, I just would say follow it, even if you don't do it professionally. Like I think Nick and I, one of the things we always say is like, one of our goals would be to see more and more people just creating things no matter what, whether that's singing, whether that's writing a poem or painting something, just taking the time to create because it's good for you, it's good for your community, and it helps us to, you know, discover more about ourselves. So,
you know, on that note, Nate, I'll say things get tough sometimes when you're working in this, and it's not always fun in games, and things can get stressful. But it was maybe a year in, Nate and I, we decided to really put 2 rules at the top for us whenever we're working together. And we're always constantly, I can check in with Nate about this, he can check in with me about this, but we try to make sure these 2 things are always true. And that's number 1, are we telling a good story? Number 2, are we having a good time? And if one of those 2 things is not checked at that moment, then we need to rethink what we're doing, you know? So we always try to keep those things because it's important. Theater is play, you know? And you're not going to make something good if you're too stressed out, you know?
So Aaron, after this, you can tell us how we did, you know?
You did great already. I can just say it. Well, and you kind of like, and Nate, you kind of took my second question was like the advice, and you both kind of did that the idea of always make sure like it's got at the heart of it, it's got to be fun. It's got to be, and if you're not enjoying it, then kind of what's the point? And I think this year that's why it's so important. We actually we finally Sways, we had this idea, we were joking in auditions, this is the joy of theater. This is what Jot, we're kind of joking. And we actually finally settled on the title of our show. Because I was like, this joy is really important to me that we keep this. And Sways was like, how about finding joy? Like, because, this idea, and that's what the goal is ultimately, right? Is find something inside that there's joy attached to it. Even if you're singing some super depressing, your daddy's son from ragtime that's just dismal, find the joy in it and the sharing. And so I think you guys nailed that in terms of always keeping that in mind, that theater should be joyful. Even if what you're presenting doesn't depict joy, it should still bring something in you. And I love that idea of like the humanness of it all. It connects us. And that's why COVID has been such a bummer. And like, where are the arts? We so desperately need the arts. Yes. Sway says we all need that right now. We're all kind of like muddling toward it and hoping. So I guess go ahead, Nate, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the communities that we formed in those shows in high school to this day are some of the most like incredible spaces I've ever been a part of. Like the feeling of being backstage before some of those musicals when we had all put in hundreds, maybe thousands of hours. And like, we'd been through this thing and then it was like, it's a go time and we're all made up and we know our lines and we're ready to go. It's just so exciting. And so like for you guys, kids who have not maybe been able to do this for the past couple of years, like get that, when you can, go do it. Cause it's really one of the best things you can do.
And I'll jump on that too, Nate. Like, I know it's the same for Nate, but my brother and sister who both went to RH, they were both active in Spotlight Theater. Nate's sisters were. My mother was, my aunts were. And I remember when I graduated with Nate, there's this tradition, or was, I'm not sure if it is anymore, to write your name backstage. And the feeling of putting my name up next to my mother's was a great feeling. But, it is about these communities, these shared theatrical spaces as well. And I just think, Rush Henrietta's really got a great, Spotlight Theater's got a really great community for that. And we thank you for everything you've done.
Aww.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, it's something we're trying really hard and just really continuing to build. I was just having a conversation with Ms. Reed about, what can we do 7/12? That's the next step. Let's get, because, it's life is so busy and kids are, busy and spreading themselves so thin, but how do we keep people with us where, and you guys know it's the place where anybody, doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, finding family, finding joy. Look at Sways keeps going. She can't stop. And that's, she's here always. And that's, really important. So if I had to say like specifically advice, I heard you say like, if there's joy, find it. If you don't give up. But what specifically, if there's a student out here who's kind of like, I don't know, do I have the talent? Is it something like, what would you tell them? What should they do to find out? Like, is this it? Like, where? I know you guys, it's like it's been programmed in you since forever. But
so I think one thing I learned recently as sort of a general part of advice is that it doesn't take a lot to say no. And you're going to get a lot of no's. They're easy to be said. But it does take some bravery and courage to say yes, to care, to try. And so when you get those no's, just take them as easily as they were given to you and focus on the things that you can do. Take a no and turn a lemon into lemonade. You can make that show. You can sing that song. You can record it and put it up for your family. You can, so those are the things I would say. This is an industry that's going to be filled with people saying no. Things change all the time and you can be the change. So.
Yeah, and honestly, after having performed for almost 30 years of my life, basically since birth, I feel some fear before I go on stage or before I go to a big performance that is really high stakes. And the thing I'll say is it's always less scary than you think it's going to be. And it's always more satisfying than you imagine it to be. It is. You always think like, oh my God, if I mess up, everyone's going to laugh and I'll have made such a fool of myself. First of all, you don't. But if you do, they don't care. They care about the good stuff. And that is why we do it. It is not about not making mistakes. It is about creating good stuff. And when you do it, it just feels so good. Like, give it a shot. You are gonna love it, and it's not gonna be as scary as you think.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No one knows you better than you. You know, that's another thing I'd say. So, especially young artists, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to try to, you know, put ideas in your head of this is the way things should be. But you check in with yourself, and you know, the thing you believe is the most true thing. So go with it.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually Harrison Sean talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that you're going to have an industry that tells you this is what you should be. This is where you fit. But I love that. Find out, and they said, you know, what's your brand? Who are you? What do you want to be as an artist? And then go for it. And I think that's magical. Well, this has been a treat, and I'm so happy to have spent an hour with you. And thank you so much for sharing out with our community. And everybody jump on, watch. Hopefully, if anybody's watching live, if there's any last questions, I think probably everybody's asked what they want to and just have really enjoyed listening to you guys share your lives and your world. And I am so grateful, and thank you. It's been wonderful.
It's fun.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Anytime. Bye-bye.